Hey, welcome everybody to our Kingdom Leadership. I'm here with our School of Leadership Development, and Pastor Matt's in the room here too. And we're going to jump into just another thought. The reason we do these Kingdom Leadership moments, just so you guys know, again, I just want to repeat, is that it's the small refinements of a good thing that make it great. And one of the challenges we face in culture is that when we become good at something, it can actually become what begins to paralyze us from going to great, because there's so many things that we can do that we just get good here, when I believe God calls us to do certain things with a real sense of, I'm going all the way in and I'm going to push through to greatness. And so when it comes to our leadership in the kingdom of God and how we walk as leaders, talk as leaders, I want to go beyond good and I want to step into great. That's why we talked about the idea of modeling it, not just making it, of stepping in to that next thing, learning to be moldable. And today I want to talk about the paradox of faith and trust. The paradox of faith and trust. And really I want to talk about this concept of expectations. Jim Kress says this: expectations are premeditated resentments. There's a deep thought. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Man, it's so interesting. You guys are single, and when somebody comes into a relationship, and I see two people start dating, and I know their stories maybe of how they got to here, and sometimes they bring in yesterday's baggage into today's party, and they're like slightly, the girl might be slightly offended at the guy for the way her old boyfriend used to act, or the guy is nervous about the girl based not upon her, but upon an old relationship, right? And these expectations, they create a premeditated resentment. It just like the second someone does something, it's 10 times what it should be because they were just waiting for it, And when we think about faith and trust, it's an area for us to build some resentment against God and against leadership. And when we build a resentment against God, we now have a resentment against his leadership. And when we build a resentment against leadership, we now have an offense with God, right? And so you can't take either one of them and separate them. They're both one and the same. So how do we deal with this paradox of faith and trust? And the reason why I say the paradox of faith and trust is, to me, that they're two radically different things. I'm holding my son when he was 3 years old, it's midnight, I walk into the house, the babysitter leaves, Laura and I just got back from some kind of conference or youth event or something, and right as I go to lay down, I hear my son go, he couldn't breathe, and I jump out of bed, one of those crazy moments. I grab my son, he's pale white in the face, I run, I'm like, what do we do? Laura's like, run him outside into the cool air, So he's looking at me, this is Ezra, and he's looking at me, probably one of the worst moments of my life. He's looking at me like, Dad, if you love me, fix this. And I'm staring at my son going, I can't do anything. My wife's on the phone with 911. I run out the front door. I'm hearing the ambulance come down the freeway because we live just 2 minutes off the freeway. And every second of those 2 minutes is like an hour for me. And I am going, son, breathe. And he's like getting limp, and he's just going, because his lungs had shut down from allergic reaction from the time of year and everything that it was. And I'm praying, and I'm in faith, and I'm saying, God, heal my son, heal my son, heal my son. And in the moment, I don't want to trust in God's timeline. I want faith to happen right now. I'm hearing the ambulance shows up. Right before they showed up, his lungs opened up just a little bit, where he was going, he was getting at least 2 or 3 drops of air in. They got there, they hit him with a EpiPen, and then his lungs, and a steroid, and his lungs opened up, and all of a sudden I'm in the back of an ambulance with my son at 12:30 in the morning on the way to the hospital while my wife is trying to rally the kids who are all asleep, come over to the hospital. And just a crazy situation where I'm going, God, I trust you. And trust says, God, you can do it in your time and you'll work it together for your good. But faith is kind of like this believing in things unseen. So it's a mandate of saying, Lord, let this happen now. Now, that was a crazy moment in my life, but this is a thing we face every day with our finances, right? Mm-hmm. God, I need a job. God, I need more money. You're single. God, I'm believing for a spouse, and there's faith for it and praying for it. But then there's the other side, the paradox here is that trust just says, whenever you do it, it's right. But faith says, do it now because I'm believing for it and I'm feeling it's a now season for it. And as a kingdom leader, we have to be real careful that faith and expectations, how do we navigate this? How do we believe for a better job? How do we believe for things break through in our marriage? How do we believe for someone? I have friends that have never been able to get pregnant. Laura and I ourselves weren't able to have kids for a while. We had to do walk a journey for almost 2 years of going, we may never have kids, and we had to walk in faith and put a belief and an expectation and call in things that are not as though they were. But in order for me to stay as a kingdom leader, I had to walk in trust and accept that God's timeline was right. I see people all the time when they're in situations where their faith is stirred. There's the paradox there. Okay, how do I trust in the timeline? And it's easy to trust in the timeline when things are going good. Trust becomes hard when things go bad. When a relationship breakup does happen, when a job does come to an end, when business is going the wrong way, and when your position at work is surrounded by people that maybe aren't the best, and you once had this great job that you love, a new manager comes in, they have their squad that they like, and now you're out of the inner circle, and what was the greatest answer to your prayers for a beautiful job is now something that's horrible, and you're just saying, God, I don't even know if I want to be here. And now it's trusting him. And I want to read a passage and then kind of pull this all together. In Luke chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus is talking here, and he's talking about love, and he says, hey, I want you to love your enemies and do good to those who hate you, to bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. I mean, you want to talk about a paradox here. Mm-hmm. This is like, you want me to do what, Lord? Mm-hmm. And he goes, the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer him the other. And from the one who takes your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from the one who takes away from your goods, do not demand them back. As you wish that others would do to you, do to them also. And Jesus just drops this bomb. Could you imagine in a legal system that when they look back to the Old Testament, said, hey, if someone kills your donkey, you get their donkey. And if they did it intentionally, you get to kill them too. I mean, there was all these laws that were very clear exchange. None of the Old Testament laws were like, hey, if something bad happens to you, so be it. It was very much cause and effect and dialed in. And now Jesus is redefining love. And he's creating a new way of thinking. And it's important for us to pause and catch this, because he's going to start teaching us about expectations and faith and trust. And if we don't understand that the kingdom is not, it's not common, it's not natural, it's not normal. Any kind of kingdom living is going to be exceptional to our human nature. It's not going to be the norm. And so when we see Jesus talking here, he's saying basically whatever you think is part of your human nature, you do the opposite. Now, Lord, why would I let someone hit me again? Why would I let them keep something they stole? Why would I do this? And he goes on, he says this, verse 32, he says, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do that. It's kind of like he's building this case, like as a kingdom citizen, we should look radically different. Like doing what is normal is actually not kingdom. It's almost like the case he's building here. And he says, if you lend to those to whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to other sinners and expect the same. But you love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting, there's our word expectations, nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. Here's the kingdom phrase. Like in everything I do, I'm looking, is this a kingdom conversation Jesus is having? Sons of the Most High now makes this a kingdom conversation. And it says, you will be sons of the Most High, meaning your actions will reflect your Father. Such a deep thought. For he is the kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So how do we pull this all in now to our life, to the things that I'm believing for, to the way that I'm living? And we could go on and on into many different areas. This concept we could look at any. I'm looking specifically today at faith and trust because I think it's central to our world. But understanding the paradox of what Jesus says to do and what we would think to do are radically different, because Jesus is trying to get us to be kingdom representatives here on earth. And so he's teaching them this idea that if we're going to walk out the kingdom lifestyle, we have to have faith and we have to believe for things. So I want to challenge each of us to have a list of things. What are we believing for? What are we asking God for? But also having like almost like a trust column, like when things aren't happening the way I thought they should or I thought they would, am I walking in trust? Because they're two separate things. And if we get faith right but don't trust, then we're selfish little kids mandating it our way. And if I get trust right and all I do is walk around and say whatever God wants to do, that's all I'm going to do, God says, no, I want you to ask. Now you're just a lazy son, a lazy daughter. So it's like this combination of the two, and that we have to go after. And if we do this, we can begin to manage our expectations. Because if you have one without the other, you'll have a wrong expectation that surfaces in your life. And it's a challenge we face at the church all the time. We're, okay, God, we're believing for this, but we're trusting in what comes. And we have to do both at the same time, even though they're different. Mm-hmm. Even though they're almost like the extreme opposites. Like trust would be like, okay, this is just what's meant to happen. Faith would be like, no, this is